The city street was alive with noise, the rush of footsteps, the hum of traffic, and the occasional burst of laughter from people who never slowed down long enough to notice the shadows among them. On a cold evening, a man sat hunched beside a dusty upright piano that had seen better days. His coat was tattered, his boots torn, and his hands, scarred, rough, and trembling, rested gently on the keys as though they were the last thing connecting him to life itself. People passed him by, shaking their heads, some with pity, others with disdain. Another homeless man begging for attention, they whispered. He looked up with weary eyes and asked softly, "Can I play it? For food?" The words hung in. The air and laughter broke out from a group standing nearby. They thought it was a joke, but they didn't know who he really was or what his music had once meant to the world. And that night, they were about to find out. He sat there in silence for a moment, the laughter still echoing, until his fingers lowered onto the keys. The sound that followed was not the hesitant tapping of a beggar pretending to know music, but the rich, haunting melody of someone who had lived 1,000 lifetimes. Notes cascaded like falling rain, weaving pain and beauty together, wrapping the busy street in a spell. The laughter died instantly. People stopped walking. Heads turned. The noise of the city faded beneath the weight of the song. And in that instant, the man wasn't homeless anymore. He was a storyteller, a magician, a legend returning to the stage he had lost. As he played, his mind drifted back to another time. He had worn a uniform once, not rags. He had marched into deserts and jungles, serving a country he believed in with everything he had. Nights were long, days were brutal, and in the darkness of war, when the sounds of gunfire rattled his bones, music was the only thing that kept him human. He carried a small keyboard in his barracks, playing to calm the trembling hands of young soldiers who feared they would never see home again. His music had saved lives, not with weapons, but with notes that gave hope when hope was gone. But war took more than it gave. It stole his friends, his peace, and eventually his place in the world. He came home to silence, no parades, no welcome. Just the echo of a country that moved on without him. And so he drifted into shadows, carrying only his gift, the one thing life couldn't take away. The street filled with faces now, strangers forming a circle around the piano, pulled by something they couldn't explain. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Why is he sad when the music is so beautiful?" The mother didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes were wet, and so were the eyes of many others who had stopped to listen. Every note seemed to open a door inside their hearts, reminding them of love, of loss, of dreams they had buried beneath the weight of their own busy lives. The veteran closed his eyes, lost in the melody, not playing for money or applause, but for survival, for the chance to feel human again. Someone pulled out a phone and began recording. Another set a sandwich on the piano, untouched as the man continued to play. A young man placed a $20 bill in the battered cup beside him, and soon coins and bills began to pile up, not from pity, but from awe. They were no longer giving to a homeless man. They were honoring an artist. They were feeding a soul that had given so much yet been forgotten by the very world he had defended. The music swelled, rising and falling like a heartbeat, carrying the weight of decades in every chord. It was more than just sound. It was confession, prayer, and redemption woven together. When the last note finally faded, the silence that followed was thunderous. People stood frozen, afraid to breathe, as though any movement would shatter the fragile beauty that still hung in the air. Then slowly, applause erupted. Not the shallow clapping given to street performers, but the kind that comes from deep within, the kind reserved for those who remind us of our own humanity. The man opened his eyes, blinking at the crowd, confused by their tears. He had long forgotten what it felt like to matter. But tonight, on a forgotten street corner, he mattered. Again, among the crowd, a man in a dark suit stepped forward. He had seen that face before, though younger, stronger, in photographs lining the hallways of old music schools. "It can't be," he whispered. "That's him." The name came flooding back, a name once whispered with reverence in concert. Halls, a name written on vinyl sleeves that had gathered dust over the years. The homeless veteran wasn't just a man who could play piano. He had once been one of the greats, a pianist whose hands had electrified audiences before war had stolen him away. The crowd gasped as the truth spread, and suddenly the laughter from earlier felt like a wound too deep to ignore. The suited man approached, kneeling beside the piano. "Sir," he said, his voice trembling, "your music changed my life. I became who I am because of you. I never thought I'd see you again." The veteran blinked, his voice a whisper. "I thought the world forgot me." And then, as if the street itself had conspired, the crowd erupted into cheers, not just applause, but a promise, a recognition that no man who gave so much should ever be forgotten again. From that night forward, everything changed. The video of his performance spread across the world like wildfire. Millions watched and wept, not just at the beauty of his music, but at the tragedy of a man discarded by society until his gift reminded them of what truly matters. Offers came: food, shelter, stages, interviews. But more important than all of that was the way people looked at him now. Not as a beggar, not as a shadow, but as a human being, as an artist, as a veteran whose story mattered. And though life had broken him in ways no one could fully repair, the piano gave him back a piece of his soul. On quiet nights, he still sat alone, playing not for crowds, not for applause, but for the brothers he had lost in war, for the dreams that slipped through his fingers, and for the hope that music could still heal even the deepest scars. And every time he played, those who listened didn't just hear notes. They heard a man's life, a story of sacrifice, survival, and the unbreakable bond between pain and beauty. So the next time you pass someone on the street, remember this. Behind the worn coat, behind the tired eyes, there might be a story waiting to be heard, a gift waiting to be shared. And sometimes, the ones the world forgets are the very ones who can teach us what it means to truly live.